Indonesia is a dream destination. White beaches, tropical forests, majestic volcanoes, a natural paradise. The problem is that you have to travel to get to these places because at the heart of paradise there are pitfalls that would make even Indiana Jones think twice. Amidst miles of reefs and beautiful jungles, tourists encounter problems that turn the trip into a survival adventure. Natural beauty coexists with logistical uncertainties, air and sea risks, earthquakes, and unforgiving laws. Today on Bello Mundo, you will understand why Indonesia is one of the most problematic countries in Asia to visit. Number 1. Location and context. The first thing you need to understand about Indonesia is that it is not just a large nation. It is a world spread across the map. It occupies a gigantic area in Southeast Asia. Many people have heard that the country is the largest archipelago in the world, but this is not a tourist exaggeration. It is literally an immensity of islands that seems to have no end, spread over almost 3,106 miles between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. The Indonesian government and the CIA speak of more than 17,000 islands. The country's own space institute puts the number at 18,000. The fact is that to this day no one knows the exact number. And among this multitude of islands are names you have surely heard: Bali, Java, Sumatra, each one with a completely different character. On one side, crowded cities. On the other, perfect beaches and turquoise water. The country is spectacular. But that's where the problem begins. Because when you put so many different islands together, everything starts to get complicated. And Indonesia's first serious challenge lies in a basic detail: getting from one place to another. Number 2. The logistical challenge. Traveling through Indonesia is a challenge even before you get to the beautiful part. You look at the map and think that everything is close by, one island next to another. But that's not quite the case. The country is so extensive that it spans from one time zone to another, covering almost the same distance from Lisbon to Moscow. And this size, which seems like just a geographical detail, becomes a real problem when you try to get from point A to point B. Here, two islands can be separated by an hour's flight or 2 days of connections. Most of the country operates at different speeds, with different infrastructure and completely unequal levels of access, and moving between them is not that simple. It starts with domestic flights. In many places, there is no choice. Either you take the plane or you don't get there. But regional airlines don't have the best reputation in the world. Lion Air, which operates the most within the country, has made headlines several times for delays, cancellations, and even serious accidents. Like what happened in 2018 when a domestic flight crashed into the Java Sea shortly after taking off from Jakarta, killing 189 people. For those accustomed to more organized aviation, this is already a setback on the first day of travel. So you think about avoiding the plane and taking a boat. The idea seems good until you see the boat. In tourist regions, ferries work well, but in lesser-known areas, the boats are often old, cramped, and uncomfortable. Add to that problems related to boat safety, and you have a bomb on the high seas. That's why maritime accidents are common. Collisions, fires, and even shipwrecks make headlines. The most recent and globally reported accident occurred in July 2025, when a ferry caught fire with more than 500 passengers on board who jumped into the sea in an attempt to save themselves. In short, getting to Indonesia is easy. The hard part is getting around without getting angry or scared. And that's just the first big problem. Number 3. Constant geological risks. As if the difficulty of getting around between the islands weren't enough, Indonesia is also located in one of the worst possible places for this. The entire country is built on the famous Pacific Ring of Fire, and that name is no coincidence. It is one of the most seismically active areas on the planet. There, tectonic plates are constantly in friction. They push, slide, and collide. And when that happens, everything shakes. Here, earthquakes are no exception. They are routine. On some islands, the ground shakes slightly, and no one even notices. But every now and then, a stronger one comes along, shutting down airports, closing roads, and knocking down whatever is in its path. And most of these islands have no infrastructure to deal with such a disaster. In other words, if something serious happens, the response is usually slow. But the problem is not just earthquakes. Indonesia is the country with the highest number of active volcanoes in the world. Some just emit smoke, but every now and then, one decides to revolt and ends up erupting. When this happens, flights are suspended, the surrounding regions are evacuated, and the sky is filled with ash for days. And as if that weren't enough, there's a third element: the tsunami. When an earthquake occurs at sea, there is always the risk of a giant wave forming and hitting the low-lying parts of the islands. It has happened before, it has caused enormous damage, and it remains a real threat. A clear example of everything we just talked about happened recently. In 2018, the country faced a series of tragedies. First, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck the tourist island of Lombok. More than 100 people died. That was in August. Less than 2 months later, in September, another even worse one came, when a 7.5 earthquake struck the island of Sulawesi, followed by a tsunami that destroyed the city of Palu. In that event alone, more than 2,000 people died. It was one of the greatest catastrophes in the country's recent history. Just when it seemed that the year had already given all it had to give, in December another one came. The Anak Krakatau volcano, located in the strait between Java and Sumatra, collapsed. One of the mountain's flanks collapsed into the sea. This generated a tsunami that hit coastal areas without warning. More than 400 lives were lost and 14,000 were injured. In other words, the risk here is not symbolic. It is real, documented, repeated. But the danger does not come only from transportation and nature. Number 4. Public safety. In large cities and busy tourist spots, tourists face another type of risk: scams, thefts, and that feeling that someone is always trying to cheat you. In Bali, for example, thefts are common, especially in busy tourist areas. There, it doesn't matter if it's a cell phone, purse, or wallet. Everything becomes a target if you let your guard down. And the most curious thing is that the thief is not always a person. In some temples and beaches, it's the monkeys that steal sunglasses, hats, and even cell phones. And worse, then they wait for you to pay them with food to give them back. It has even become a tourist attraction, but in practice, it's a jungle scam. And speaking of scams, taxi drivers deserve a separate chapter. Some drivers offer you a ride for a fixed price, but when you arrive at your destination, the price doubles. Others claim that the meter is broken, or they take a huge detour just to increase the final price. That's why many people only use apps. But even with apps, some drivers try to take you off the route to charge extra. Another common trick is when exchanging money. Some currency exchange offices in tourist areas advertise a great rate on their signs, but when it comes time to count the money, some bills are missing. They count quickly, create confusion, and you leave thinking you won, but you lost. It's so common that there's even a video on YouTube just teaching you how to avoid this type of trick. In general, Indonesia is not a violent country, but there are many hidden traps in everyday life. However, women need to be more flexible to face the country. Number 5. Being a woman in Indonesia. Within the resort area, everything seems peaceful. but you only need to stray a little from the tourist route to realize that Indonesia is still a very conservative country, especially for women. And those who travel alone quickly feel this. The country is predominantly Muslim, and although a large part of the population is more flexible, there are still regions where the expected behavior of women is different. In these places, the rules are much stricter. Short clothes are frowned upon. Kissing in public? Forget it. And walking alone at night can generate all kinds of comments. Even in larger cities, there are frequent reports of verbal harassment on public transportation, insistent stares on the street, and even invasive approaches at tourist sites. It's not violent, but it is uncomfortable, especially if you're not expecting it. That doesn't mean you can't travel peacefully, but it does mean you need to know where you're stepping. And for women, this detail can completely change the experience. Number 6. Strict laws. Although welcoming, the rules in this country are not only strict, they are radical, and in certain cases completely out of the ordinary for what many people are used to. To begin with, there is the religious issue. As we mentioned earlier, the majority of the population here is Muslim. And in some parts of the country, this is not just culture, it is law. In the province of Aceh, for example, in the north of the island of Sumatra, Sharia law, the Islamic code of conduct, is applied literally. An example of this occurred in 2018, when residents were punished in a public square for violating these rules. 3 men and 5 women were sentenced to caning for showing affection in public. In practice, it may seem that this does not apply to tourists, but that's not quite true. If someone decides to take the case to the police, you will have to answer like any other citizen. And if the laws on behavior are already scary, those on illegal substances are even worse. Here, any deal involving illegal substances can result in life imprisonment or something worse. And there is no shortage of examples. In 2015, 2 Australians who tried their luck paid the price with their lives. Muran Sukumaren and Andrew Chen were part of a group known as the Bali Nine and tried to enter the country with more than 8 kilograms of opiates. They were arrested, convicted, and executed in 2015. Another similar case involves Frenchman Serge Atlaoui. He was arrested for involvement with an ecstasy laboratory and sentenced to death. The case became a dispute between governments, and he is still on death row today. France is trying to repatriate him. Indonesia will not budge. For the country, the law applies to everyone. And there is no discussion. It doesn't matter if it's a joint at the bottom of your backpack, an unprescribed bottle, or the wrong pill in the wrong place. So, if you have any doubts, the recommendation is simple. Don't take it. Don't accept it. Don't make it up. Here, any slip-up can be too costly. Number 7. Different tourism. Despite all the strictness we've seen so far, Bali is almost another country within Indonesia. While the rest of the country strictly follows the rules of the Muslim religion, Bali seems to operate in a bubble. There, alcohol is allowed, couples walk hand in hand without any problems, and the nightlife is wild, especially in the Kuta region, where bars, parties, and nightclubs occupy every corner. But this more liberal environment also opens the door to other types of problems, prostitution and sex tourism. Officially, the world's oldest profession is considered a crime against morality, but in practice it is tolerated, and in some places even regulated. In the past, this took place in specific areas known as lokalisasi. Today, it happens directly on the internet, especially via social media. But the most curious thing is not even that. It's that this type of unconventional tourism is not just about men looking for women. There is a large movement of Western women who travel there in search of intimate relationships, romance, and attention. And who offers this? The famous Kuta cowboys. They are on the beaches, selling diving, renting surfboards, but what they really sell is something else. They are young locals who flirt with foreign women, sing romantic songs, accompany them to parties, and create bonds. Sometimes they receive gifts. Other times they get scooters, stereos, even paid rent, all without asking directly. At least that's what they say. But between flirting, tourism, and nightlife, another problem begins to emerge: the direct impact on health. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Number 8. Serious public health problems. If the trip already seems challenging because of geography, logistics, and laws, the health aspect doesn't make it any easier. Many people go to Indonesia thinking about diving, eating well, enjoying nature, but they forget that the country has health risks well above average. To start with, the water. You can't drink tap water in most of the country, and that's no exaggeration. Brushing your teeth with the wrong water can already knock you down. Some people spend days locked in their hotel room just because they ate a salad washed with unfiltered water. And the problem is that in many places, even the ice comes from dubious sources. If it's not sealed mineral water, don't trust it. Street food is also a separate issue. Indonesian cuisine is delicious, full of spices with unique dishes. But anyone who eats at any street stall without looking twice runs the risk of getting food poisoning as a souvenir of their trip, especially those with more sensitive stomachs. And as if that weren't enough, the country still faces outbreaks of diseases such as dengue fever and rabies. Dengue fever, especially in the wetter seasons, is a real problem. Rabies, on the other hand, has an aggravating factor. The virus is spread mainly by dogs, but can also be transmitted by monkeys. And yes, those same monkeys that steal your sunglasses on the beach. According to recent studies, Indonesia is one of the countries with the most cases of rabies in Asia. And the worst part, if you are bitten and do not get the vaccine in time, there is not much you can do. The disease is practically fatal. In more remote areas, access to medical care is limited. And on some smaller islands, it can take hours to find a hospital with even minimal facilities. In other words, a glass of water, a rare kebab, or a mosquito bite can turn your trip into a real nightmare. Number 9. The language barrier and cultural confusion. Even after going through all this, there is one more thing that can stop tourists in their tracks in the first few minutes of arriving in the country: communication. Indonesia is a place where language can be a real obstacle, especially outside tourist centers. The official language is Bahasa Indonesian, but the country is so diverse that there are more than 700 languages spoken across the islands. That's right, 700. And English, which usually saves the day when traveling, doesn't always work here. In the more touristy areas, you can get by. But once you leave those areas, things change quickly. In many regions, even the basics are not guaranteed. Some tourists arrive thinking they will be able to get by with gestures, translation apps, or their intermediate English. But when you're on a crowded ferry, in the middle of a local market, or trying to find your hotel in a remote village, none of that helps much. And it's not just the language that complicates things. Indonesia's cultural diversity itself can be confusing. There are more than 300 different ethnic groups, each with their own customs, beliefs, and even social rules. What is normal in Java may be offensive in Sumatra. What is welcome in Bali may be misinterpreted in Aceh. The result? It's easy to make a mistake without meaning to, whether it's the way you dress when greeting someone, or even the way you eat. And no one warns you. You only realize it when you start to feel the stares. Before ending this video, it's good to make one thing clear. Our intention here is not to speak ill of Indonesia, nor to say that the country is not worth visiting. Quite the contrary. Indonesia is a fascinating place. It has incredible landscapes, a rich culture, and experiences that cannot be found anywhere else in the world. Those who have been there know this. Those who dream of going have plenty of reasons to do so. But that's not the point here. The idea is not to romanticize. It's to show that, along with all this beauty, there are real challenges, and that many people only discover this when they're already there, in the middle of the mess. What we did was just highlight what doesn't always appear in drone videos, cute reels, or influencer photos. Indonesia remains one of the most incredible destinations on the planet, but it's not the kind of place you can just stumble upon by luck. So, did you enjoy getting to know this other side of Indonesia? What surprised you most about this unique city? Tell us in the comments. And before you leave, subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell so you don't miss any episodes of our Bello Mundo, and try using the new Hype video feature. It really helps the channel reach more people and continue bringing you different content like this.